Welcome to Luma Sleep, where stories slow the world down and help you find rest. I'm Luma, your guide tonight. Thanks for being here. Tonight, we do not climb. We do not chase the hours we lost. We do not arrange the scattered pieces of the day. We let them remain unfolded, unfinished, unbothered. If your breath still hurries, let it remember slowness, not by command, not by effort, but by permission, like a tide that no longer fights the shore, like dust settling back into silence. If your feet still carry the weight of paths, let them pause now. Let them feel the ground, not as burden, not as duty, but as home. There is no task here, no crown to balance, no road to follow, only this, the steady hush that greets you the moment you stop trying to arrive. Let your fingers forget their grasp. Let your jaw forget its name. Let your shoulders remember they were not carved from stone. You are not leaving the world. You are loosening from it, like fruit falling when it is ready. And the ground, it holds you, not as stone, not as law, but as soil, as forest floor, as memory. So breathe, not to fix, not to fill, just to be. And in that being, know the night remembers you. The stars still lean close, and the silence, patient, waits with open hands. There is a sky you have not looked at in years, not because it vanished, not because it forgot you, but because life pulled your gaze downward, toward doors to close, toward floors to sweep, toward voices that asked for more than you could give. And yet, above all that, untouched, there is still a sky. It is not the sky of prophecy, nor the sky of maps. It does not insist on direction. It does not measure time. It simply waits, as wide and patient as silence itself. Once you knew this sky, not by name, not by study, but by trust. You felt its presence the way a stone feels the river, not always flowing, but always remembered. And in that knowing, you belonged. You belonged without proving. You belonged without earning. You belonged because you breathed, and breathing was enough. The stars once leaned closer to you, not to tell stories, not to promise miracles, only to listen, only to rest beside your silence. The moon once curved its body toward the edge of your window, not as king, not as judge, but as companion, a pale lantern reminding you that even the night was never empty. Perhaps you have forgotten this. Perhaps the days have folded over themselves like heavy cloth, covering the memory until it feels more like dream than truth. But the sky has not gone. It has not closed. It has not taken back what it once offered. It waits, as it always did, between one story ending and the next beginning. You do not need to climb to it. You do not need to call it down. All that is asked is stillness. Stillness like water before the stone falls. Stillness like a candle just before the flame bends. Stillness like a body that finally stops holding what it never needed to carry. And in that stillness, the memory returns, not loud, not sudden, but sure. You are not going backward. You are not becoming child again. You are becoming listener again. The sky between stories does not need your belief. It only needs your quiet. So breathe, not to reach higher, not to sink deeper, but to arrive here, where the stars bend low and the moon waits, not as stranger, but as prince who has always known your steps. The sky remembers you, and tonight, if you let yourself soften, you may remember it too. She came barefoot, not as a queen, not as a guest of honor, but as a girl who had walked too long in silence. No veil concealed her face, no crown pressed against her brow, no jewels announced her worth. Only skin marked by labor, only steps worn soft by years, only breath that trembled, not with fear, but with readiness. The courtyard waited, wide, empty, dust gathered in corners like unspoken memories. No music played, no torches flared, no audience hushed to watch. And yet the air shifted, not loudly, not with spectacle, but with the kind of pause that comes when a room remembers it has been entered before. She felt it in her ankles, in her knees, in the slow bend of her spine. Her body leaned forward as though recalling a rhythm the mind had long abandoned. Each step was not taken, but returned, as if her feet were tracing circles already drawn, as if the ground itself was teaching her where to go. The night tilted toward her, the stars quieted their glitter. Even the stones beneath her arches seemed to breathe, their coolness no longer indifferent. This was not arrival, it was recognition. The dance did not begin with music, it did not begin with invitation. It began with her, her breath, her willingness, her body remembering that movement could be prayer, that silence could be rhythm, that stillness itself could be the drum. She swayed, not in flourish, not in performance, but as one who listens with the whole of herself. Her hair slipped forward, curtaining her cheek. Her hands opened outward, palms empty, palms honest. And in that openness, the courtyard seemed to lean nearer, not to command, not to consume, but to accompany. Dust lifted in faint spirals, as though stirred by unseen breath. Shadows stretched, lengthened, then curved back around her feet. The night itself was shaping a circle. Her body moved inside it. Her body remembered a turn, a bend, a rise, a fall, not choreographed, not rehearsed, but inscribed long before her birth, waiting in her marrow to be called back. And she answered, not with words, not with thought, but with motion. One step, then another. The hush deepened. The courtyard, lonely for so long, filled itself again with the soundless music of her return. This was where the dance began, not in story, not in dream, but in the moment a body remembered that it could belong to the night. Her body did not rush, it did not hurry toward music, it did not demand rhythm, it carried its own. Her arms lifted, slowly, as though the air itself had been waiting to rest in her palms. She did not raise them to claim, she did not raise them to resist. She raised them because her bones remembered that once they had opened wide, not to hold the world, but to release it. Her shoulders tilted, not with burden, but with a grace older than her name. Her spine curved, gentle, unforced, like a bow drawn not to strike, but to listen. The bend of her back was not surrender, it was recognition, a way of speaking without sound, a way of saying, "Yes, I am here," without a single word. Her hands trembled, but not with fear. They trembled like branches touched by the first wind of spring, unsure, but ready. Each fingertip traced the air as if brushing unseen threads. Threads that tied her to something vast. Threads that hummed with a song she had almost forgotten. Her feet pressed into the stone, not to mark it, not to conquer it, but to greet it. The ground responded with its own hush, a vibration barely felt, a whisper rising through her soles. She knew, without knowing how, that the courtyard remembered her, that the earth beneath her still carried the imprint of dances long before. Her body turned, not perfectly, not cleanly, but honestly. The hem of her dress caught in the air, her breath caught with it. And for a moment, the world seemed suspended, not moving forward, not falling back. Only here, only now, only this turn, this breath, this pulse. She lifted her chin, not high, not proud, but steady. Her eyes did not seek the stars. Her eyes did not search the horizon. They rested in the darkness between both. And in that darkness, she felt the first stirring of recognition, not from above, not from beyond, but from within, from the marrow, from the silence, from the part of her that had always known how to move, even when the world had asked her to be still. Her body remembered. It remembered the circle. It remembered the sway. It remembered the echo of the steps that belonged not to duty, not to service, but to freedom. And as she moved, it was not performance. It was not display. It was remembrance. The kind that does not ask, the kind that does not explain, only the kind that comes back to life when called by night. She had not meant to be gone for so long, but absence is quiet, and quiet lengthens easily, from a day to a season to a lifetime. The courtyard did not protest. The stones did not cry out. The night did not accuse her. It simply grew stiller, the way a room settles when footsteps fade from it, the way a song lingers but never begins again. Her leaving had not broken the place, it had only deepened its hush. The dust gathered, not bitter, only patient. The air cooled, not cold, only waiting. And in that waiting, an emptiness formed, not hollow, not ruined, but shaped like a chair drawn back from the table, like a bed kept unrumpled for return. The space she left was never filled. No dancer claimed it, no shadow settled into it. Even time, so eager to cover over, did not erase her outline. The courtyard kept it, an opening, a pause, a circle unbroken because it had never been closed. Now, as she moved within it, she felt the outline again. Her body stepped into it as if into her own reflection. Her breath slid into it like a river reclaiming its bed. The air shifted, not like wind, not like voice, but like presence leaning aside to make room for her. The stones seemed softer now, not because they changed, but because she had returned. The dust lifted gently as though stirred awake from a patient dream, and she knew the space had always been hers, not by title, not by right, but by belonging. This belonging was not claimed, it was not demanded, it was simply recognized. As if the courtyard whispered, "You were never forgotten. You were never replaced. You were only awaited." Her steps slowed, not from weariness, but from reverence. Not the reverence of fear, the reverence of recognition. She closed her eyes, her arms stilled, her chest rose once, fell once, and in that breath, the courtyard felt whole again. Because absence, however long, cannot unmake presence. Because what waits does not grow weaker, it grows ready. And tonight, in the space she once left behind, she had returned. Not as stranger, not as guest, not even as dancer, but as the missing note the silence had carried all this time. He did not come like thunder. He did not split the night with fire. He did not descend in triumph. He arrived in silence, like a thought that surfaces gently after years of forgetting, like a shadow that belongs to you, yet waits until you turn to recognize it. The courtyard did not announce him, no flare of torch, no burst of sound. But the air thickened, the dust stilled, the stars seemed to lean ever so slightly forward. And in that leaning, he was there. The maid felt it first as a pause inside her chest, her breath caught, not harshly, not painfully, but like a door left ajar in the dark. A hush that waited to be entered. She lifted her gaze, not upward, not far, but just enough to find the shape of him. He was pale, but not fragile, bright, but not blinding. His presence was not brilliance, it was balance. The light that touched him did not scatter, it curved, it held, it shaped itself into a body, neither holy shadow nor holy flame. He stood not as ruler, not as conqueror, but as reflection, as echo, as rhythm given form. Her dance faltered, not in clumsiness, but in recognition. Her body stilled, not because it was commanded, but because something within her had turned its face toward something long awaited. Their eyes met, not like collision, not like demand, like two currents joining quietly, finding one another in the dark. Her lips parted, but no word came, no greeting, no plea. Words would have been smaller than what pulsed between them. He did not smile, he did not bow, but his stillness was invitation enough. The maid lowered her arms slowly, palms open, fingers soft, as though she had been carrying weight and only now remembered she could set it down. The prince tilted his head, the faintest arc of acknowledgement, the faintest curve of yes. And in that shared pause, a circle closed around them, not of stone, not of dust, but of presence, the kind that reshapes silence without sound, the kind that turns waiting into arrival. It was not the beginning of love. It was not the start of a story. It was the recognition of two beings who had always known they would find one another, not by searching, not by striving, but by returning to the rhythm that already held them both. And so, in that first glance, nothing happened, and everything began. He did not rush toward her. He did not claim the space. He did not command her body to bend. Instead, he simply raised his hand, slowly, as if the night itself was lifting it for him, as if every star had gathered its hush to guide the gesture. The movement was not grand, it was not polished, it was not a king's decree. It was simple, it was quiet, it was human. A hand offered, not to take, not to bind, but to meet. The maid felt her breath pause again. The circle of silence around her deepened, as though waiting for her reply. Her own hand trembled, not with fear, but with recognition. This was the gesture her body had long rehearsed in dreams, the reaching, the answering, the touch not yet given. She looked at her palm. It was rough, lined with work, creased by days of carrying more than it should. And yet, in the glow of his presence, her hand did not feel small. It felt seen. It felt ready. She lifted it, not quickly, not certain, but honestly. The space between them narrowed, not with urgency, with inevitability. His fingers did not seize. They did not tighten. They hovered, then rested, then settled into the curve of hers. And in that meeting, something passed. Not spark, not fire, not magic the way stories insist. Something softer, something older. The recognition of weight shared, the permission to move together, the knowing that one rhythm could hold two bodies. The courtyard shifted around them. The dust rose faintly, Like a sigh, the stone seemed less cold. The night opened wider. She did not bow. He did not pull her close. They simply stood, hand in hand, in the middle of a silence that now belonged to both of them. And in that stillness, the dance began. Not with music, not with step, but with the truth that her hand had risen and his hand had answered, and in that answering, the waiting was over. It was not promise, it was not vow, it was presence. Two palms meeting, two shadows touching, two lives pausing long enough to feel they were not alone. And sometimes that is all the night asks. Not song, not spectacle, only a hand extended and a hand brave enough to meet it. The silence did not break. It did not scatter into noise. It grew deeper. Around them, the courtyard breathed. The stones, once heavy and still, seemed to shift in their patience. The dust rose faintly, then settled again, like a chest rising and falling in sleep. Above, the sky gathered its witnesses. One star appeared, then another, but not in haste, each one arriving with the same slow reverence that guided her hand to his. The night leaned closer, not to listen, not to speak, simply to be present. The maid felt it first as a warmth at her shoulders, though no fire burned there. Then as a soft ache in her ribs, as though her own heart was remembering a language older than its beat. The prince did not move. He did not release her hand. He did not press it tighter. He only stood, an unmoving flame, a body made of pause. But his stillness was not absence. It was communion. In his quiet, she recognized her own. In his presence, her trembling steadied. In his shadow, she found space enough to rest. For so long, she had danced alone, each step an offering to silence, each turn a prayer without echo. But now there was echo, there was return, not in words, not in music, but in this. Two figures standing still while the night curved inward to hold them. The stars bent lower, flickering like eyes that knew her name. The moon, half veiled, slid its light across the stones, tracing their feet as if blessing the ground they had claimed together. And though no vow was spoken, she felt one forming, not as sentence, but as certainty. That this night would remember them, that the stones beneath them would carry their weight, that the stars above would not forget how two shadows touched and made the silence bloom. Her breath softened, her eyes closed, and still she felt him, not pressing, not fading, but near. The night leaned closer, and she leaned with it. For a moment, it seemed as though the whole world paused, holding its breath, not to wait, not to fear, but to honor the first joining of hands, the first stillness shared. And in that pause, she understood. Sometimes The beginning of a dance is not a step, it is a silence, and the silence, when held by two, is music enough. The first step was not hers alone, it was not his alone, it was both, woven together, so gently that the courtyard itself seemed to exhale. No drum beat guided them, no string pulled them forward. There was no melody, no chant, no signal. Only the hush, only the silence thickened into rhythm. Their feet touched stone, and the stone seemed to answer, a vibration, a resonance, a hum beneath the skin. The maid leaned into it. The prince leaned with her. Two bodies circling, not as master and servant, not as ruler and subject, but as mirrors. Her arm brushed the air. His shadow followed. His hand tilted slightly. Her body curved in response. The dance was not rehearsed. It had no design, yet every step felt older than memory. A pattern drawn long before either of them had entered this world. The courtyard knew it. The night knew it. The stars above, leaning close, flickered like sparks falling from their circle. And for the first time, she felt what it was to be answered. All her life, her movements had dissolved into silence. Her gestures had been swallowed by shadow. Her steps had echoed back to her, lonely, hollow. But now, her body did not vanish into the air. It was received, it was echoed, it was held. Every turn of her wrist was caught in his glance. Every sway of his shoulder was steadied by her rhythm. Together, they created a pulse that belonged to neither of them, and both of them. The dust rose and lingered like incense. The air grew warmer, though no fire burned. Even the stones beneath them seemed to sigh, as though after waiting so long they were finally allowed to rest. This was not spectacle. No crowd would remember it. No storyteller would embellish it. It was quieter than that, deeper, more human. It was two bodies moving in silence until the silence itself became music. The courtyard breathed with them, the night bent inward, and the rhythm, soft, patient, endless, filled the hollow space that had lived between them all these years. And perhaps if someone had listened closely enough, they would have heard it. Not sound, not song, but something softer still. The night's own heartbeat, at last remembering how to keep time. Her fingers hovered, light as breath, near his sleeve, close enough to feel warmth, close enough to know presence, but she did not seize it. She did not clutch. She did not pull. She did not attempt to hold the moment as if it might flee. For she understood, somehow, that the dance was not hers to keep. It was only hers to join. Her hands curved gently, palms open, palms ready, yet never closing in hunger. Her body moved beside his, but never sought to bind his shadow to her own. This restraint was not hesitation, it was reverence. To grasp too tightly would have broken the spell. To cling would have silenced the silence that carried them both. So she let her hands fall like petals resting on water, light, temporary, graceful. The prince's gaze followed her, not as master, not as judge, simply as witness. His eyes, deep with light, acknowledged her choice. They glimmered faintly, a yes unspoken, a yes understood. Her feet traced the circle again. Her skirt whispered across stone. Her breath rose and fell like tide against shore. Each step reminded her this was not possession, this was communion. And communion cannot be seized, it can only be allowed. She remembered other nights, nights of reaching for what slipped away, nights of holding what broke in her grasp, nights of fingers cramped from trying too hard to keep what never wished to be kept. But here, there was no need. The rhythm did not require her force. The silence did not ask her to prove. The dance did not belong to her alone. It belonged to the night, and the night was generous. A flower grew near the courtyard wall, its petals pale as frost. She bent near it for a breath. Her hand hovered, but she did not pluck. She did not disturb. She simply stayed close enough for warmth to pass between them. And perhaps because she did not take it, the flower seemed to open wider, as though the absence of demand was itself an invitation. She rose again, her hand drifting outward, and returned to his rhythm. This, she realized, was the truest part of the dance, not the steps they traced, not the turns they shared, but the restraint, the refusal to bind, the gentleness that allowed the silence to bloom. Her palm brushed the air just beside his chest. Her fingertips hovered an inch from his jaw. And she did not touch. She did not need to. For what they carried was not possession, it was presence. And presence, when honored, asked nothing more than to be allowed. The night did not hurry. It did not rush to crown the moment. It unfolded slowly, like a scroll that has waited centuries to be unrolled. Above them, the stars gathered, not in brilliance, but in patience. One by one they arrived, as if taking their seats around a circle already in motion. The moon did not blaze. It did not command attention. It leaned forward, quiet, steady, its light brushing the edges of stone like a hand smoothing fabric. The maid felt it in her chest, the stillness that was not empty, the pause that was not neglect, the waiting that was not punishment, but invitation. Her steps slowed, her breath lengthened, and the prince, still holding her hand, matched her rhythm with the gentleness of a tide receding. The courtyard seemed to lean inward. The walls, the shadows, the air, all of it listened, not for words, not for vows, but for presence itself. She thought of all the nights she had walked beneath this same sky, her body weary, her arms heavy, her heart carrying silence that no one noticed. Back then, the stars had seemed distant, the moon indifferent, the air too thin to hold her ache. But tonight was different. Tonight, the silence was not hollow. It was alive. It waited with her. It waited for her. The prince's eyes lifted briefly, meeting the pale arc of moonlight. And though no sound passed his lips, something unspoken stirred, a recognition, a belonging. She followed his gaze upward, and there, in the space between stars, she saw it too. The waiting that was never cruel, the patience that was never scorned. The night had not forgotten. It had not moved on. It had not closed its doors. It had waited, and in that waiting, it had grown tender. Her body stilled again. Her heart beat slow. Her hand tightened slightly in his, not to claim, not to hold, but to acknowledge that she too understood. Time does not erase what belongs. It only waits for return. The night wrapped around them both, not as curtain, not as cage, but as shawl. It settled gently over her shoulders, over his glow, over the circle of stone. And for the first time, she felt the truth that absence had never been loss. It had been preparation. It had been waiting. And now the night exhaled, not to end, not to fade, but to welcome. Welcome her steps. Welcome his hand. Welcome the dance that no music required. The night had waited, and at last it was no longer waiting alone. No vow was spoken, no promise was carved into stone. No words crossed their lips to bind what already belonged. And yet the courtyard knew, the night knew, the silence itself carried the weight of an oath that had no need of language. The maid stood still, her hand still folded into his, and felt the hush deepen, not heavier, not darker, but fuller, as though the air itself was swelling to hold what had just been born. Every stone beneath them seemed to glow faintly with memory, not a light you could see, but a warmth that pressed up through her souls. The dust lifted once, spun slowly, and fell again, a gesture of reverence. The stars blinked, not brighter, not faster, but as if nodding, as if acknowledging, as if whispering among themselves, "Remember this." The moon bent lower, its curve tilting slightly, casting its silver not only on the stones, but across their joined hands. That single touch of light made their shadows one, two shapes merging, not erased, but intertwined. The maid's breath slowed, her ribs rose gently, fell gently, and in that rhythm she felt the presence of something older than them both. The prince did not move, yet in his stillness there was promise enough, not of possession, not of forever, but of recognition. The kind of recognition that cannot be undone. She thought of all the oaths she had heard in her life, sworn loudly, kept poorly, fragile things that shattered the moment silence returned. This was different. This was not declaration. This was not demand. This was quiet joining, woven into the marrow of night. The oath was in the stones, which would remember their weight. It was in the air, which would carry the hush of this moment long after they had gone. It was in the stars, who had leaned close enough to listen. It was in the moon, who had reached down to seal the circle with its light. And most of all, it was in them, in her hand that did not release his, in his gaze that did not falter, in their shared silence, which spoke more clearly than any vow could dare. The oath was simple, that this moment was real, that it had happened, that nothing, not time, not distance, not forgetting, could erase it. For what is witnessed by the night is never lost. It is kept, it is guarded, it is held until the world is ready to remember again. And so they stood, two figures, two shadows, two lives, bound not by speech, but by silence. And the silence was enough. She lifted her gaze and found his eyes. They did not blaze, they did not pierce, they did not claim. They opened, soft, steady, as still water opens to the sky above it. And in them she saw herself, not as the maid who swept dust from corners, not as the girl who carried burdens in silence, not as the forgotten one who had walked through years unnoticed. She saw another self, hidden, waiting, whole, a flame balanced in water, a pulse steady beneath the hush, a body that had always belonged to rhythm, even when rhythm was denied. His gaze did not create her, it revealed her, like light tracing words already etched into stone, like breath clearing fog from a forgotten mirror. Her lips parted, but no words formed. Her chest rose once, fell once, as if to say, "Yes, that is me," without voice. The prince did not smile. He did not frown. He did not adorn the moment with expression. He only looked, and in that looking, she felt whole. For so long, she had feared her reflection, in glass, in water, in eyes that judged. Each reflection had shown only fragments, the servant's hands, the weary face, the girl who never fit the tale. But now, in his eyes, she saw the fullness, the strength folded in gentleness, the ache carried like treasure, the silence held like song. It startled her, not with fear, but with relief. To be seen, not for role, not for duty, not for mask, but for essence. The courtyard seemed to lean closer, as if it too wished to glimpse the image he held of her. The stars flickered slowly, as if adjusting their light to frame what they witnessed. And for a moment, she wondered, was this what the moon carried in its glow? Not light alone, but reflection, the truth of things, revealed without asking, returned without demand. Her hand rose lightly, hovering near her chest, as if to hold steady what she had just seen. Her body swayed softly, not in dance, but in reverence. The prince did not move. He allowed her the silence. He allowed her the pause. And in that pause, the mirror remained, clear, quiet, unbroken. She looked once more, and in his eyes, she found not stranger, not master, not myth, but herself. And that was enough. It came quietly, not as wind, not as voice, not as anything she could name. A breath, drawn slowly into the space around her, not her own, not his, something other, something older. She felt it before she heard it, the shift of air against her neck, the subtle rise of her chest without effort. Her lungs filled, not by command, not by need, but as if carried. Her body softened, her ribs widened, her spine loosened, and for one suspended moment, she was breathing with another. The prince did not move, but she saw it in his stillness. He too felt it, the joining, the hush that thickened between their bodies, the invisible presence that wrapped itself around them like silk. It was not ghost, it was not spell, it was presence, the night itself exhaling through them. She did not resist, she did not ask, she did not try to claim it. She simply listened, with skin, with ribs, with the hollow beneath her sternum. The breath moved through her like tide moves through shore, steady, inevitable, gentle. It circled her body, rose through her throat, settled at her crown, and though it faded, she was not left empty. She was left joined. For years she had carried an absence inside her, a hollow where laughter never reached, a quiet where song had been stilled. But now that hollow was filled, not by sound, not by word, but by breath. She touched her chest lightly, fingers spread wide, acknowledging the gift. Her own breath returned, slower, truer, woven into a rhythm she had not known she'd lost. The prince's gaze remained steady. He knew, she knew, there was no need to speak. This was not gift given, not treasure bestowed. It was something older, something always hers, only hidden, only buried, only waiting for the silence deep enough to uncover it again. The night had kept it, safeguarded it, held it in the folds of its patience. And now, without ceremony, without demand, it returned it to her. Her breath was hers again, and yet not only hers. It carried another presence now, a pulse of night, a rhythm of stars, a whisper of the moon's own sigh. And she understood. She was never breathing alone. She never had been. The dance did not end suddenly. There was no cut in rhythm, no breaking of the circle, no silence louder than before. It slowed, it softened, it shifted the way dusk slides into night, not by command, but by surrender. Her steps, once steady, grew lighter. Her heels barely touched the stone. Her breath floated higher, like smoke thinning into air. The prince moved with her, not pushing, not pulling, but mirroring her descent into stillness. His hand did not release hers. It only loosened, not absence, but gentleness, not departure, but space. Their bodies turned once more, a slow spiral that closed not a circle, but an embrace of silence. The courtyard noticed. The air cooled, but not with loss. The stars blinked slower, as if lowering their gaze. Even the moon dimmed its glow slightly, not in farewell, but in respect. Her skirt brushed his leg one last time. Her shoulder leaned just within the radius of his shadow, and then the rhythm paused. Not ended, paused. The maid felt her chest settle. Her ribs ached, but in the way lungs ache after deep, full breath, not emptiness, completion. She looked at him, not to hold his image, not to memorize, but to witness. And in his stillness, she saw no grief, only presence, only patience, only the quiet certainty that what had been shared could never be unshared. Her hand lowered slowly, falling back to her side. His hand lingered a heartbeat longer, hovering in the air like a flame unwilling to fade. Then it, too, fell, not extinguished, only rested. Around them, the silence deepened again, but this silence was different, not hollow, not waiting, not yearning. It was full, it was satisfied, it was whole. The maid bowed her head, not as subject, not as servant, but as one who honors a truth too vast for words. The prince inclined his face slightly, a gesture without ceremony, without throne, a simple yes, a simple now. And so it was. The last turn completed, the rhythm folded itself inward, the night closed gently around them. There was no farewell, there was no promise, there was only stillness. Stillness that did not erase, stillness that did not sever, stillness that carried within it the memory of steps, the echo of breath, the joining of silence. And sometimes, the last turn is not ending, it is only rest. The courtyard exhaled, the air loosened its hold, the silence, once thick with presence, spread outward, gentle, like ripples across water. She stood alone now, her hand empty, her body still trembling with the rhythm that lingered long after the steps had slowed. The prince was gone, not vanished, not erased, simply folded back into the night that had always belonged to him. She did not feel abandoned. She did not feel robbed. She felt expanded, as though the breath she carried was larger than her chest could contain. The courtyard remained. The stones were the same. The dust, the shadows, the air, unchanged, yet not untouched. For everything had shifted slightly, not visibly, not in ways the eye could capture, but in the hush that now lay deeper, truer, more alive. Her body remembered. Her shoulders still swayed as if following a rhythm too soft for ears. Her fingers curled and opened as if still brushing against his sleeve. Her steps traced the circle once more, even as her feet stood still. This was what it meant to dance without music, that when the partner was gone, the rhythm did not vanish. It remained inside her, woven into her marrow, a pulse she could not silence. The world beyond the courtyard waited for her, walls of stone, narrow streets, rooms filled with work and voices that would not know what she had seen. She knew she would return to them. She knew she would walk again with the weight of duty, with the silence of labor, but she would not return the same. The rhythm would remain, the night's breath would stay, the memory of his gaze, the reflection of herself that he had shown her would live behind her eyes. The stars above did not follow her. They kept their watch over the courtyard. The moon did not descend to walk at her side. It drifted higher, patient, and still she did not feel loss, for she carried them now, not as visions, not as illusions, but as presence, woven into her skin, stitched into her breath. The world without him was not the world without rhythm. It was the world with rhythm hidden, a rhythm only she would hear. She stepped once, twice, testing the air. The silence moved with her. Her chest lifted in time. Her shadow curved slightly forward. And she smiled, not with triumph, not with longing, but with the quiet certainty that he had not left. He had only returned to where he belonged, and so had she. The stars did not follow her. They remained above the courtyard, steady, patient, burning in their own silence. Once, she might have begged them for guidance, for promise, for prophecy. Once, she might have strained to catch the flicker of their voices, to shape them into words that could lead her forward. But not tonight. Tonight they said nothing, and that silence was not neglect, it was completion. For all that needed speaking had already been spoken, not in language, not in story, but in presence. The stars leaned close once. The moon had drawn her into rhythm. The night had given her breath. Now there was no need for repetition. Her eyes lifted toward them anyway. She looked without grasping, without pleading. She looked as one looks into the face of an old friend who does not need to speak to be understood. And the stars, in their stillness, answered her gaze, not with word, not with sign, but with the same quiet knowing that had carried her through the dance. Her hand rose to her chest, the memory of his hand, the hand that had once met hers, still lingered there, not in weight, but in warmth, not in grasp, but in rhythm. And in that warmth she understood. The stars were no longer teachers. They were no longer voices outside of her. They were inside now. Their silence was her silence. Their presence was her presence. The world at the threshold waited. Stone walls, paths She knew too well. Voices that would not ask where she had been, tasks that would not pause for what she had seen. But she would walk back into it, changed, for she no longer needed the stars to speak. She carried their hush with her. She carried their patience. She carried their rhythm, and that was enough. She lowered her hand, let her breath fall into step, and turned toward the path that led beyond the courtyard. The stars did not bid farewell. The moon did not whisper promise. The night did not follow her steps. They stayed behind, silent, watchful, rooted in the sky. And she smiled because she understood. Silence is not absence. It is presence that no longer needs to explain itself. What the stars no longer said was not loss, it was gift. For when the stars fall quiet, you discover their voice already beating within your own chest. And so she walked on, barefoot, breathing, her silence steady, her silence whole. That night, she returned to her room. The walls were the same, narrow, stone, lined with shadows that remembered her silence. The bed waited, simple, unadorned. The blanket carried the faint scent of work, of weary evenings, of days pressed into fabric. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. She moved quietly, her body no longer hurried. She did not rush to hide herself, nor collapse into sleep as one crushed by fatigue. She stood at the window first. The latch loosened easily, and she left it slightly open, not wide, not waiting, just enough. The night slipped in, its cool breath grazing her cheek, its silence folding into the room. It did not intrude, it remembered her. She touched her chest, fingers spread lightly, and felt it again. That breath, not hers alone, that rhythm she now carried. It pulsed beneath her ribs like a lantern hidden under cloth, steady, quiet, undeniable. It was the moon, but not above her now. It was inside her, a glow without flame, a weight without burden, a companion without demand. She sat at the edge of her bed, and the boards beneath her did not creak. Even the house seemed to listen, as though honoring the silence she had brought back with her. Her hands rested loosely, no longer clenched, no longer curled inward as if to protect themselves. They opened freely, palms relaxed, as though even in stillness they remembered the dance. The stars outside did not blink in farewell. The moon did not bend toward her, and yet she did not feel apart. They were with her still, not in the sky, but in her breath, in her blood, in the steady rhythm that would not leave. She lay back, drawing the blanket only halfway, her body curved gently, like a question that no longer needed answering. Her breath slowed. Each inhale touched the memory of his hand in hers. Each exhale returned the hush of the courtyard stones. She did not cling to dream. She did not force her eyes to close. She only allowed the night to enter, allowed her chest to widen, allowed her body to rest without explanation, and in that resting, the moon's glow spread softly through her veins, no longer distant, no longer unreachable. It belonged to her now, and she belonged to it. The maid who once thought herself alone, who once thought herself forgotten, slept not as servant, not as shadow, but as one who had carried the night inside. And in her chest, the moon breathed on. The house was quiet, not because it slept, but because it listened. The walls, accustomed to years of labor's echoes, to footsteps worn by duty, to sighs swallowed before they formed words, now rested. Even the floorboards, which once complained beneath her weight, remained still. She breathed slowly. Each breath entered the hush, as if placing a seed in soil. Each exhale spread softly outward, like water finding its way into hidden roots. Her eyes closed, but she did not drift away. She drifted inward, and within that inwardness she found it, a garden, not of stone walls, not of trees she had walked beneath, but of silence itself. A garden where petals unfolded without color, without name, made only of breath, where paths curved not by design, but by patience, where every leaf was made of stillness and every stem of memory. This was the garden she had carried all along, the place that had held what she thought lost, the place that had whispered when no voice answered, the place that had waited until she was quiet enough to hear it again. She walked its paths, not with feet, but with breath. She touched its flowers, not with hands, but with the soft spread of silence through her chest. And the garden responded, not loudly, not with miracle, but with recognition. The petals swayed as if greeting her. The air thickened as if leaning toward her. The hush bloomed as if unfolding the truth that she had never left. She had only forgotten. The moon prince was not here. The stars were not here, and yet their presence remained, woven into the soil of her silence, etched into the sky of her chest. The garden did not demand belief. It did not need ritual. It did not need tending. It only needed stillness. And in her stillness, it thrived. She understood now. The courtyard was not the only sacred ground. The dance was not the only rhythm. The breath shared with the night was not the only gift. All of it, the rhythm, the silence, the reflection, the waiting, had been planted inside her. The garden was hers, always had been, always would be. Her body sank deeper into rest. Her breath slowed further, and the hush expanded, filling every corner of the room, every fold of the blanket, every shadow on the wall. No dream carried her away. No vision beckoned her forward. Only this, the garden inside her silence, steady, alive, unfading, and she belonged to it completely. She did not dream of the courtyard. She did not dream of his hand in hers. She did not dream of the steps that had traced the circle of silence. She did not need to, for the dance was not memory now. It was presence. It lived inside her, woven into the threads of her breath, stitched into the rhythm of her chest. The stars remained outside, high, patient, watchful. They did not call her name. They did not flicker a message. They did not lean close as they had before. They stayed where they were, silent, steady, certain, and still. She did not feel their distance, for their hush was in her now. Their light had already entered her bones. Their waiting had already become the patience she carried in her own steps. She lay with one hand resting on the curve of the pillow, her breath moving gently through the stillness. Every inhale opened the door to the garden within her. Every exhale released the weight she no longer needed. Her body softened, her hands no longer curled inward, her shoulders no longer guarded, her jaw no longer clenched around unsaid words. She was not the maid tonight. She was not the servant of silence. She was not forgotten shadow. She was the one who had danced with the moon, who had carried the breath of the night, who had found in stillness the rhythm that never left. The stars outside blinked once, not in greeting, not in goodbye, only in knowing. And though her eyes were closed, her breath stilled slightly as if she had seen them. The room listened, the bed listened, the very air curved inward to cradle her. She belonged now, not to duty, not to absence, not to longing. She belonged to presence, to silence, to the rhythm that was both hers and more than hers. The night folded gently around her. The stars watched from their patient distance, and together, without word, without vow, without farewell, they stayed. They stayed in her breath. They stayed in her blood. They stayed in the garden of silence that bloomed in her chest. And when sleep finally touched her, it was not escape. It was not forgetting. It was simply rest, the kind of rest that comes when you know you will never again be truly alone. The stars stayed with her, always,